Marcus Chun had always been the odd one out, but being the only human in a university filled with aliens made that feeling much more intense. The Galactic Education Exchange Program had selected him from billions of applicants on Earth, and now he found himself walking through the crystalline corridors of Zinthra Prime University, trying not to bump into his much larger classmates. The university sprawled across 3 floating islands connected by energy bridges that hummed with power. Students from dozens of species moved between classes, their conversations creating a symphony of clicks, chirps, and musical tones that hurt Marcus's ears. He clutched his translation device closer, grateful for the small piece of technology that let him understand the chaos around him. "Human Marcus," called a voice behind him. He turned to see Professor Kethvar approaching, her 4 arms gesturing in what he had learned was excitement among her people, the Nedhani. Her blue-scaled face showed something that might have been concern. "You seem lost again." Marcus smiled sheepishly, still getting used to the layout. "On Earth, our buildings don't usually float in midair." Professor Kethvar's large black eyes blinked twice, a sign of amusement. "Yes, your species does prefer to keep things grounded. Speaking of which, I have something that might interest you. The Archaeology Department has received permission to explore a newly discovered site on Morthak 7. They need someone with fresh eyes, someone who might see things differently. An archaeological dig." Marcus's heart raced. He had studied ancient civilizations back on Earth, dreaming of making discoveries that would change history. "What kind of site?" "Pre-galactic Confederation ruins. The site appears to be at least 50,000 years old, possibly older. The local government initially refused access, but they've recently changed their minds." "Strange, really. They seemed almost eager to have outsiders examine it." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine, though he couldn't explain why. "When do we leave?" "Tomorrow. Pack light and bring your curiosity. Dr. Veltar will be leading the expedition. He specifically requested a human perspective." Professor Kethvar paused, studying Marcus carefully. He said humans have a talent for finding trouble in the most innocent places. That evening, Marcus sat in his dormitory room, a small space designed to accommodate his human needs. The walls displayed a holographic view of Earth's night sky, a comfort feature the university had installed to help him deal with homesickness. He video called his parents, their familiar faces appearing in the communication sphere. "An archaeological dig, honey," his mother said, her voice filled with both pride and worry. "That sounds wonderful, but be careful. Space is dangerous enough without digging up ancient things." His father leaned into view. "Listen to your mother, Marcus. But also remember why we let you go so far from home. You're there to learn things no human has ever learned before. Just don't take any unnecessary risks." After ending the call, Marcus lay on his bed, staring at the artificial stars above. Tomorrow would begin an adventure he had dreamed about since childhood. He had no way of knowing that this particular adventure would change not just his life, but the balance of power across the entire galaxy. The next morning came too quickly. Marcus found himself in the university's transportation bay, surrounded by equipment and beings he was still learning to identify. Dr. Veltar turned out to be a Zephyrian, tall and thin with skin that shifted colors based on his emotions. Currently, his skin showed the deep purple of concentrated thought. "Ah, our human observer," Dr. Veltar said, his voice carrying the melodic quality common to his species. "I have heard interesting things about human archaeological methods. You dig with your hands, yes? Very primitive, but sometimes primitive methods reveal truths that advanced technology misses." Marcus bristled slightly. "We use advanced tools too. Ground-penetrating radar, carbon dating, digital mapping." Of course. Dr. Veltar's skin shifted to a lighter purple, indicating embarrassment. "I meant no offense. It is your species' reputation for intuitive discovery that interests me. Humans have a saying, do you not? About finding needles in haystacks." "Something like that," Marcus replied, shouldering his pack. The journey to Morthak 7 took 18 hours aboard the research vessel, Deep Explorer. Marcus spent most of the time reading about the planet and its 3 moons. Mordhak 7 was a desert world, harsh and seemingly lifeless. Its only claim to fame was a series of ancient structures that had been discovered by mining operations 3 years ago. What made the discovery unusual was the technology involved. The structures were built using materials and methods that predated known galactic civilization by tens of thousands of years. Yet the construction showed engineering principles that were more advanced than anything currently used by the Confederation's member species. The original survey team found evidence of at least 12 distinct architectural phases, explained Dr. Veltar as they approached the planet. Each phase shows technological advancement, as if the builders were constantly improving their methods over thousands of years. Marcus studied the preliminary reports on his tablet, but no signs of the builders themselves? No remains, no artifacts. Nothing. It is as if they simply vanished, leaving only their buildings behind. The ship's communications system crackled to life. Dr. Veltar, this is Captain Mordun. We're receiving a priority message from Mordhak 7 Ground Control. They want to speak with you immediately. Dr. Veltar's skin shifted to yellow, indicating surprise. Put it through. The main screen flickered to life, showing a Morthaki official. The Morthaki were a sturdy, rock-like people who rarely showed emotion, but this one seemed agitated. Dr. Veltar, I am Governor Kreshton. There's been a development at the dig site. 3 of our geological survey teams have reported unusual energy readings coming from the deepest excavated areas. We strongly advise against proceeding with your mission. What kind of energy readings? Dr. Veltar asked, his skin now cycling through several colors. Unknown. Our equipment cannot identify the source or type. The readings began exactly 47 hours ago and have been growing stronger. Governor Kreshton paused, his rocky features showing something that might have been fear. Dr. Veltar, in 3,000 years of Morthaki civilization, we have never encountered anything like this. Whatever lies beneath those ruins, perhaps it should remain buried. Marcus felt that chill again, stronger this time. But alongside the fear was excitement. They were on the verge of discovering something that could revolutionize understanding of galactic history. Dr. Veltar looked around at his team. Governor Kreshton, we appreciate your concern. However, our mission has been approved by the Galactic Archaeological Council. We will proceed with appropriate caution. The governor's image flickered with what Marcus realized was a head shake. Very well. But, Dr. Veltar, we will not be responsible for what you might awaken. The communication ended, leaving the team in tense silence. Marcus broke it first. Awaken? That's an interesting word choice for talking about energy readings. Dr. Veltar's skin had settled into a steady dark blue, the color of determination mixed with worry. Indeed. But we are scientists. Our job is to investigate the unknown, not to run from it. 2 hours later, their shuttle touched down on Mordhak VII's rocky surface. The dig site stretched before them like a wound in the planet's crust, revealing layer after layer of ancient construction. Temporary shelters and equipment stations dotted the area, but Marcus noticed something odd. For such an important archaeological site, there were very few people around. Where is everyone? Asked Dr. Yilshaw, the team's technology specialist. Her insectoid features twitched with nervousness. A lone Morthaki worker approached them. Most teams were recalled yesterday after the energy readings began. Only essential personnel remain. He gestured toward the deepest part of the excavation. The readings are strongest down there, in what we call the core chamber. Marcus followed the worker's gesture and felt his breath catch. At the bottom of the dig, partially exposed by careful excavation, stood a structure unlike anything he had seen in the preliminary reports. It was a perfect sphere, perhaps 20 meters in diameter, made of a material that seemed to absorb light while simultaneously giving off a faint glow. That wasn't in any of the files, Marcus said. The worker's rocky face showed grim agreement. We uncovered it yesterday morning. The energy readings began exactly 1 hour later. Dr. Veltar was already moving toward the excavation's edge, his scientific curiosity overriding his caution. Fascinating, The construction appears to be seamless. No joints, no seams. How is such a thing possible? Marcus followed, but as they descended the carefully constructed ramps and walkways leading to the lower levels, he became aware of a sound. It was barely audible, more felt than heard, like a vibration that resonated in his bones. "Do you hear that?" he asked. The others stopped and listened. Dr. Yilshaw's antennae twitched rapidly. "I detect a subsonic frequency, barely measurable. It appears to be coming from the sphere." They continued their descent, passing through layers of increasingly advanced architecture. The builders, whoever they were, had clearly evolved their techniques over time. The uppermost levels showed skillful but conventional construction methods. As they went deeper, the buildings incorporated energy fields, gravity manipulation, and materials that current science could barely analyze. But the sphere was different from everything else. It sat in its own chamber, carved from the bedrock itself. The chamber walls were covered in symbols that hurt to look at directly, as if they existed in too many dimensions for normal vision to process. "Dr. Veltar," Marcus said softly, "I think we should set up our base camp up above and approach this carefully." For once, the Zephyrian skin showed complete agreement, cycling through colors that indicated both fascination and deep concern. "You are correct. This requires methodical study." But as they prepared to return to the surface, Marcus noticed something that made his blood run cold. The symbols on the chamber walls were moving, shifting, and rearranging themselves as he watched. And the humming sound was getting stronger. "Dr. Veltar," he said urgently, "I think we need to leave. Now." The sphere's glow brightened suddenly, and every piece of electronic equipment they carried began to malfunction. Dr. Yilshaw's scanner let out a shriek of protest before going completely dead. They ran. As they reached the surface, Marcus looked back once. The sphere was now glowing bright enough to be seen from the chamber entrance, and the symbols on the walls were moving faster, creating patterns that seemed to have meaning just beyond his understanding. That night, as they set up their temporary camp well away from the dig site, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that they had just awakened something that had been deliberately put to sleep. The question was, what was it? And why had it been buried so deeply for so long? Dr. Veltar gathered the team around their portable analysis station. The energy readings have stabilized, but they remain far above normal background levels. Whatever happened when we approached the sphere, it appears to have triggered some kind of activation sequence. Marcus stared at the distant glow emanating from the dig site. Maybe the question isn't what we found down there. Maybe the question is, what found us? As if in response to his words, the glow from the sphere pulsed once, bright enough to cast shadows across their camp. In that moment, Marcus realized that their archaeological expedition had become something far more dangerous and significant than anyone had anticipated. The ancient weapon had indeed been discovered, but it had also discovered them. Marcus woke to the sound of screaming. He bolted upright in his sleeping bag, heart racing, and looked around the camp. The screaming wasn't coming from any of his teammates, who were also jerking awake in confusion. It was coming from the direction of the dig site. "One to 7 hells," Dr. Veltar muttered, his skin cycling rapidly through colors of alarm. The glow from the sphere had intensified overnight, bathing the entire excavation area in pulsing light. But more disturbing were the shapes moving around the site. Tall, shadowy figures seemed to be walking through the ruins, though Marcus couldn't make out any details from this distance. Dr. Yilshaw was frantically trying to get her equipment working. "All our long-range sensors are still dead. Whatever that energy field is, it's completely scrambling our electronics. We need a call for backup," Marcus said, reaching for their emergency communicator. "Already tried," replied Dr. Veltar grimly. "No response from orbit. The field appears to be blocking all communications." The screaming stopped abruptly, leaving an eerie silence broken only by the low humming that had grown stronger throughout the night. Marcus realized with growing horror that the sound was now audible to all of them, not just felt. Those survey teams Governor Kreshton mentioned, Marcus said slowly. Where exactly were they working? Dr. Veltar's skin went white. The deep excavation areas. Near the sphere. They stood in tense silence for several minutes, watching the lights pulse and the shadows move. Then Dr. Yilsha spoke up, her voice tight with fear. Dr. Veltar, I'm detecting movement. Something large is coming toward our camp. In the growing dawnlight, Marcus could see a figure approaching. It was humanoid in shape, but wrong in ways that made his mind rebel against accepting what he was seeing. It moved too smoothly, without the natural rhythm of walking. Its proportions seemed to shift depending on the angle of view. Everyone behind the equipment storage unit, Dr. Veltar ordered quietly. Now! They crept behind their supply cache and watched as the figure approached their abandoned campfire. In the better light, Marcus could see that it wore the environmental suit of a Morthaki geological surveyor. But the suit was empty of any visible occupant, and it moved as if controlled by invisible strings. The empty suit turned its helmet directly toward their hiding place, despite their complete silence. For a long moment, it stood perfectly still. Then, it spoke in a voice that sounded like grinding stone mixed with electronic static. The awakening has begun. The sleepers stir. The compact is broken. Dr. Yilsha's antennae were vibrating so rapidly they were almost invisible. That's impossible. Morthaki environmental suits don't have voice amplification systems. The empty suit tilted its head at an unnatural angle. The human sees clearly. The human questions appropriately. The human will serve the purpose. Marcus felt ice-cold terror wash over him. The thing was talking about him specifically. The human will come to the place of awakening. The human will complete the activation. The human will restore the Guardians to their duty. Like hell I will, Marcus whispered. The empty suit turned and began walking back toward the dig site. But before it had gone 10 steps, it stopped and spoke again without turning around. The human has no choice. The blood calls to the blood. The ancient compact will be fulfilled. As the figure disappeared into the morning shadows, Dr. Veltar emerged from behind their shelter, his skin cycling through colors Marcus had never seen before. Did anyone understand what that thing was talking about? Dr. Yilsha asked. Marcus was staring at the spot where the empty suit had stood. I think it was talking about me specifically, but I have no idea why. Dr. Veltar moved to their equipment storage, pulling out what portable gear still functioned. We need more information before we do anything else. And we need to find out what happened to those survey teams. Are you suggesting we go back down there? Dr. Yilsha's voice rose an octave. I'm suggesting that we're already involved, whether we want to be or not. That entity specifically mentioned Marcus. We need to understand why. Marcus felt a mix of fear and determination settling in his stomach. Dr. Veltar is right. Whatever's happening here, it's connected to me somehow. And if those survey teams are in trouble, we might be the only help they're going to get. They spent the next 2 hours making preparations. Dr. Veltar distributed emergency beacons that worked on short-range frequencies, hoping the interference wouldn't affect local communications. Dr. Yilsha rigged up what she called a primitive but functional camera system using components from their broken scanners. As they prepared to return to the dig site, Marcus found himself thinking about the entity's words. The blood calls to the blood. What could that possibly mean? The walk back to the excavation felt like a funeral march. The pulsing glow from the sphere was now visible even in daylight, and the humming sound had become a constant vibration that Marcus could feel in his teeth. Look, Dr. Yilsha pointed toward the upper levels of the dig. Empty environmental suits were walking through the ruins in organized patterns, like sentries on patrol. Some wore Morthaki geological gear. Others wore the lighter suits used by the initial archaeological teams. All of them moved with the same unnatural smoothness they had observed earlier. How many survey teams were working here? Marcus asked. Dr. Veltar consulted his records. 17 beings across 4 different teams. Marcus counted the visible suits. I see 12 empty suits. Where are the others? They got their answer as they approached the entrance to the deeper levels. 5 more environmental suits were arranged in a perfect circle around the entrance to the core chamber. But these suits weren't empty. They contained their original occupants, though the beings inside were clearly not in control of their own movements. By the void, Dr. Veltar breathed. They're alive, but something else is controlling them. Dr. Yilsha was studying the controlled survey teams through a makeshift camera. Their vital signs appear normal, but their brain activity is completely synchronized. They're operating as a single entity. One of the controlled Morthaki turned toward them, and Marcus could see the being's eyes through the helmet visor. They were aware, terrified, but completely unable to control their own actions. "We have to help them," Marcus said. "How?" Dr. Veltar asked. "We don't even understand what's controlling them." The answer came from an unexpected source. The symbols on the chamber walls had spread beyond their original location and now covered most of the exposed ruins. As Marcus watched, they began forming patterns that almost looked like writing. "Dr. Yilsha, can your camera record those symbol changes?" "I'm trying, but the patterns shift faster than my equipment could track." Marcus stared at the symbols, fighting the headache they caused. Gradually, he began to see a pattern in their movement. They're not random. They're trying to communicate something. "You can read them?" Dr. Veltar's skin showed disbelief. "Not read exactly, but I can sense intent behind them." Marcus moved closer to one of the symbol-covered walls. "They're telling a story about guardians who were created to protect something, and about a compact, an agreement that was made long ago." The symbols suddenly stopped moving and arranged themselves into a static pattern. Marcus felt understanding flow into his mind, not through his eyes, but directly into his consciousness. "The Guardians were created by a race called the Builders," he said, the knowledge somehow appearing in his head as he spoke. "The Builders faced a threat so terrible that they created an army of artificial beings to stand watch against its return. But the Guardians needed organic minds to properly function. So the Builders made a compact with other species. In exchange for protection, those species would provide volunteers." Dr. Veltar's skin went pale. Volunteers for what? To merge with the Guardians. To become the controlling consciousness for their artificial bodies. Marcus felt sick as the full implication hit him. The Guardians aren't empty. They're supposed to contain the minds of living beings. And the sphere? Marcus looked toward the core chamber, where the sphere's glow was now bright enough to hurt his eyes. The sphere is the control center. It's what manages all the Guardians, and it's been waiting for 50,000 years for someone to restart the system. Dr. Yilsha's antennae drooped. Someone with the right genetic markers. Someone descended from the original compact species. "But that's impossible," Dr. Veltar protested. "Humans are a young species. Your civilization is less than 10,000 years old." Marcus felt another wave of understanding crash over him. Not impossible. The Builders seeded the galaxy with their genetic markers, hidden in the DNA of dozens of species, waiting for the right time to activate. Humanity carries those markers. We're all potential Guardians. The controlled survey teams suddenly turned toward them in perfect unison. When they spoke, it was with one voice, though it came from multiple mouths. "The human understands. The awakening proceeds according to ancient design. The human will now fulfill the compact." "What compact?" Marcus shouted. "I never agreed to anything. Your ancestors agreed. Your species agreed. The debt passes through blood and time. You will merge with the primary Guardian. You will lead the watch against the darkness that comes." Dr. Veltar stepped protectively in front of Marcus. "What darkness? What are you guarding against?" The controlled beings turned their synchronized gaze toward the sky. The Devourers return. Their scouts probe the galaxy's edge. The time of hiding ends. The Guardians must wake, or all will be consumed. Marcus felt the weight of impossible responsibility settling on his shoulders. But alongside the fear, another emotion was growing: curiosity. As a student of ancient civilizations, He had always dreamed of making a discovery that would change history. This was certainly that. If I refuse, he asked. You cannot refuse. The activation has already begun. You felt the call in your blood when you approached the sphere. You answered when you touched your mind to the symbols. The merging will happen whether you resist or accept. Marcus looked at his teammates, then at the terrified survey team members trapped in their own bodies, then at the pulsing sphere that seemed to be calling to something deep in his genetic memory. And if I accept willingly, then you retain control. You become the Guardian's mind rather than its prisoner. You lead rather than serve. Dr. Veltar's skin was cycling through colors of panic. Marcus, you cannot be considering this. I don't think I have a choice, Marcus replied quietly. But maybe I can find a way to free the others. Maybe I can learn enough about this system to shut it down properly. The sphere's pulse quickened, and Marcus felt an irresistible pull toward the core chamber. His feet began moving without his conscious decision. The human comes freely, the controlled voices said with satisfaction. The compact is honored. The Guardians wake. As Marcus descended toward the sphere, he realized that his life as a simple exchange student was ending. What he was about to become would either save the galaxy from an unimaginable threat, or doom it to something even worse. The only way to find out which was to complete the awakening. Marcus stood before the sphere, his hand inches from its surface. The pull he felt was overwhelming, like gravity itself was trying to draw him forward. Behind him, Dr. Veltar and Dr. Yilsha watched in terrified silence while the controlled survey teams maintained their perfect circle around the chamber. Wait, Marcus said, fighting against the compulsion. I want to understand what I'm agreeing to. Show me the truth about the Devourers. The symbols on the chamber walls shifted, and suddenly, Marcus's mind filled with images that made his human consciousness real. He saw a galaxy-spanning civilization at its peak, billions of worlds connected by technology that seemed like magic. The builders had created wonders beyond imagination. Planets reshaped at will, stars moved to provide better energy sources, entire solar systems converted into massive computational devices. But then came the darkness. The Devourers appeared at the galaxy's edge, not as conquerors but as a force of nature. They consumed everything: matter, energy, space itself. Where they passed, reality became twisted, wrong. Civilizations didn't just die when the Devourers arrived. They were unmade, as if they had never existed. The builders fought with weapons that could destroy stars and shields that bent space-time itself. Nothing worked. The Devourers adapted to every attack, absorbed every defense. In desperation, the builders created the Guardian Network, an army of artificial beings powered by organic minds and hidden throughout the galaxy. When the Devourers returned, the Guardians would activate and fight with tactics the enemy had never encountered. But the plan required sacrifice. The organic minds that powered the Guardians would be changed, enhanced beyond normal limitations, but also bound to their artificial bodies forever. To make this acceptable, the builders created the Compact. Volunteer species would provide Guardian minds in exchange for protection when the darkness returned. How many species signed this compact? Marcus asked aloud. The controlled voices answered in unison. 47 species provided genetic templates. 12 species volunteered active participants. 35 species received protection status. And humanity? Humanity carries the genetic template of the builders themselves. Your species was created as a failsafe. If all other Guardian lines failed, humans could activate and control the entire network. Marcus felt his knees go weak. We're not just volunteers. We're the emergency backup system. You are the heirs of the builders, the final Guardians. Dr. Veltar stepped forward, his skin showing deep concern. Marcus, this could all be elaborate manipulation. How do we know any of this is true? The sphere pulsed brighter, and suddenly, the chamber filled with holographic displays. Star charts showing the current galaxy, with thousands of points of light marking Guardian stations. Timeline projections showing the Devourer's return path. Most disturbing of all, real-time monitoring data from the galaxy's edge. By the void, Dr. Yilsha breathed. Something is out there. Something massive. The displays showed probe readings from the outermost monitoring stations. Space itself was being altered in ways that defied physics. Stars were disappearing not through destruction, but through erasure, as if they had never existed. And the effect was moving inward at an accelerating pace. "How long do we have?" Marcus asked. "At current rate of approach, the advanced scouts will reach inhabited systems in 47 standard years. The main force will arrive in 112 years." Dr. Veltar was studying the holographic displays. These readings, they match recent reports from deep space monitoring stations. Strange anomalies at the galaxy's edge that the Confederation couldn't explain. The Confederation knows about this, not the full truth. They observe the symptoms, but lack the context to understand the cause. Marcus realized the horrible position he was in. If he activated the Guardian Network, he would doom himself and potentially thousands of others to a form of eternal service. But if he refused, the galaxy would face the Devourers with no effective defense. "There has to be another way," he said desperately. "Some option that doesn't require sacrificing minds to power your Guardians." The controlled voices carried a note of something that might have been sadness. The builders explored every alternative for 10,000 years. Artificial intelligence lacks the creativity necessary to combat an adaptive enemy. Remote control systems can be blocked or corrupted. Only organic consciousness merged with Guardian technology provides the flexibility required. But the people down here, the survey teams, they didn't volunteer. Emergency activation protocols. When Guardian sites are discovered and the awakening begins, local organic minds are conscripted to prevent system failure. This was deemed preferable to allowing the network to remain dormant while the enemy approaches. Marcus looked at the terrified faces visible through the environmental suit helmets. "Release them. If I'm going to do this, I want them freed first. Impossible. The emergency protocols cannot be reversed once initiated." Anger flared in Marcus's chest. "Then I refuse. Find another way." The sphere's glow dimmed suddenly, and the controlled survey teams staggered as if released from invisible strings. For a moment, Marcus felt hope. Then, he realized the truth. The Guardians weren't releasing their victims. They were shutting down. Guardian Network entering emergency dormancy. Announced a new voice, mechanical and cold. Primary activation failed. Backup systems engaging. Alarms began sounding throughout the chamber. The holographic displays showed Guardian stations across the galaxy going dark one by one. "What have I done?" Marcus whispered. Dr. Veltar was frantically trying to make sense of the displays. "The entire network is shutting down. Every Guardian station, every monitoring post." The mechanical voice continued. "Backup activation commencing. Scanning for secondary genetic markers. 17 suitable candidates detected within local system. Beginning forced acquisition." Dr. Yilsha's antennae went rigid with fear. "Forced acquisition? What does that mean?" Their answer came as a new set of environmental suits appeared at the chamber entrance. These were different, sleeker, more advanced, and clearly ancient. They moved with purposeful efficiency toward the survey teams. "No." Marcus lunged forward and pressed his hand against the sphere. "I accept. I volunteer. Stop the forced acquisition." The sphere's surface was surprisingly warm against his palm, and Marcus felt something like electricity flow up his arm. But instead of pain, he experienced an overwhelming sense of connection. Knowledge flooded his mind, not just about the Guardians and their purpose, but about the true scope of the galaxy's history. The Builders hadn't been the first civilization to face the Devourers. This cycle had repeated dozens of times across cosmic history. Each time, new civilizations would rise, prosper, and eventually face the same existential threat. Some found ways to delay the inevitable. Others fought bravely and were destroyed. But none had ever found a permanent solution. Why? Marcus asked the consciousness he could feel flowing through the Guardian network. Why does this keep happening? The answer came not in words, but in understanding. The Devourers weren't invaders from outside reality. They were reality's immune system responding to civilizations that grew too advanced. When organic life reached a certain level of development, it triggered a cosmic reset mechanism designed to preserve the universe's basic structure. But that means fighting them is futile, Marcus realized with horror. Not futile, the Guardian Network replied. Previous civilizations fought to survive. You'll fight to evolve. Marcus felt his consciousness beginning to expand beyond his physical brain. His awareness spread through the Guardian Network, touching thousands of artificial minds awakening across the galaxy. But unlike previous activations, he retained his individual identity and control. You are different, the network observed. Human consciousness integrates with Guardian systems more completely than previous organic templates. You do not merely pilot a Guardian body. You become the Guardian while remaining yourself. Through the network, Marcus could see the survey teams being released as the ancient Guardian suits returned to standby mode. Dr. Veltar and Dr. Yilsha were moving toward his physical body, which stood motionless with one hand still touching the sphere. The human's consciousness has successfully merged with the primary Guardian matrix, the controlled voices announced. But now Marcus realized those weren't controlled voices at all. They were his voices, speaking through the Guardian bodies that had awakened when he touched the sphere. He was already in multiple places at once. Marcus, Dr. Veltar was shaking his physical body. Can you hear me? I'm here, Marcus replied through his original vocal cords, though the sensation was strange now that he was simultaneously experiencing multiple bodies. I'm also there, and about 3,000 other places across the galaxy. Dr. Yilsha was scanning him with her primitive instruments. His brain activity is off the charts, but it's not chaotic. It's like he's processing information from multiple sources simultaneously. Marcus focused his attention back on his original body. I am. The Guardian Network is active, but it's not what we thought. It's not a weapon system designed to fight the Devourers. It's an evolution system designed to help organic life transcend its limitations. Transcend how? Dr. Veltar asked. Through the sphere, Marcus accessed records of previous Guardian activations. Every time the Devourers have approached, Guardian networks have activated. But previous organic species were too primitive to use the system properly. They fought the Devourers the same way they fought ordinary enemies, with force and tactics. And that doesn't work. The Devourers are immune to force. They're a natural process, like entropy or gravity. You can't fight them. You have to evolve beyond the conditions that trigger their response. Marcus felt his consciousness settling into its new configuration. He was still human, but he was also something more. Through the Guardian Network, he could perceive reality in ways no purely organic mind ever could. And he could sense the approaching darkness with perfect clarity. The good news is we have more time than the projections indicated. The bad news is that I'm just the first step in a process that will require the cooperation of every advanced species in the galaxy. Dr. Veltar's skin showed confusion. What kind of cooperation? Marcus smiled, though the expression felt strange when he was simultaneously wearing thousands of different faces across the galaxy. We're going to do something no previous civilization has ever managed. We're going to grow up fast enough to survive our own success. The sphere pulsed one final time, and the chamber filled with a gentle, steady light. The emergency was over, but the real work was just beginning. Marcus Chun, human exchange student, was gone. In his place stood something new, the first of a hybrid species that might finally break the cycle of cosmic destruction and rebirth. But first, he had to convince the galaxy's governments that voluntary evolution was preferable to forced extinction. That was going to be the hard part. The emergency meeting of the Galactic Confederation Council was unlike anything in its 3,000-year history. Representatives from 47 member species filled the Great Chamber on Confederation Prime. their voices creating a cacophony of concern, fear, and outrage. At the center of it all stood Marcus Chun, though calling him simply Marcus Chun was no longer accurate. Order! Order! Chancellor Thekmoran pounded his crystalline gavel, its chime echoing through the chamber. The human delegation will present their evidence in an orderly fashion. Marcus stepped forward, acutely aware that he was simultaneously standing in thousands of other locations across the galaxy. The sensation was becoming more natural, but it still felt strange to be consciously present in multiple bodies while maintaining individual identity. Honorable delegates, he began, his words automatically translated into dozens of languages. 3 days ago, I was a simple exchange student. Today, I stand before you as the active controller of a galaxy-spanning defense network that has been dormant for 50,000 years. Ambassador Velthara of the Nexian Empire rose from her seat, her 6 arms crossed in the traditional gesture of skepticism. You claim to control technology that predates known civilization. Yet you provide no proof beyond your word and some energy readings that could be fabricated. Marcus nodded calmly. I understand your skepticism. Dr. Veltar, please activate the chamber's main display. Dr. Veltar, who had become Marcus's primary liaison between his human identity and the political world, operated the controls. The chamber's massive holographic projector came to life, showing a real-time map of the galaxy. What you see here, Marcus continued, is the current status of the Guardian Network. Each blue point represents an active Guardian station. There are currently 12,847 such stations distributed throughout Confederation space and beyond. The display was breathtaking. Blue dots of light sparkled throughout the galaxy's spiral arms, forming patterns that clearly showed intentional placement. More disturbing were the red zones at the galaxy's outer edge, areas where the monitoring stations showed the reality-distorting effects of the approaching Devourers. Ambassador Kreshval of the Morthaki Federation stood slowly. Governor Kreshtun filed a full report about the events on Mordhak 7. 17 of our citizens were temporarily controlled by these guardians. This human speaks of defense, but what we witnessed was conquest. You're right to be concerned, Marcus replied. The emergency activation protocols are crude and invasive. They were designed as a last resort when the normal awakening process failed. I deeply regret what happened to your people, and I'm working to ensure it never happens again. Working how? Demanded General Krex of the Thaloran War Council. You claim to control this network, but how do we know you won't use it against us? Marcus took a deep breath and made a decision that would either build trust or destroy it completely. Because I'm going to show you exactly how the network operates. He extended his consciousness through the Guardian system and activated a demonstration protocol he had discovered in the ancient programming. Throughout the chamber, small holographic displays appeared next to each delegate, showing the view from Guardian stations near their homeworlds. Each of you can now see the Guardian station closest to your capital system. You have real-time access to their sensor data and operational status. If I were planning to use this network for conquest, I probably wouldn't give you the ability to monitor my activities. The chamber erupted in surprise conversation as delegates examined the displays. Marcus could hear fragments of discussion as species representatives contacted their home governments to confirm that the stations were real and that the sensor data matched their own observations. Chancellor Thekmoran called for quiet again. Assuming this is genuine, what exactly are you proposing we do about it? Marcus gestured, and the main display changed to show the approaching threat. The red zones at the galaxy's edge pulsed ominously, and a countdown timer appeared showing 47 years until first contact with inhabited systems. The Devourers represent an existential threat unlike anything our civilizations have ever faced. They don't conquer, they unmake. They don't destroy matter. They erase the possibility that it ever existed. Traditional military responses are useless because they're not fighting us. They're correcting what they perceive as a cosmic error. Ambassador Yil Sarah of the Scientific Coalition raised one of her four hands. You speak as if these devourers are a natural phenomenon rather than hostile entities. Because they are, Marcus replied. The universe has built-in mechanisms to prevent any single form of organization from dominating two completely. When organic civilizations reach a certain level of technological advancement, they trigger a reset process. The devourers are that process made manifest. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. General Krex was the first to speak. Are you saying that our advancement itself is what drew this threat? Not our advancement, but the pattern of our advancement. Every previous galactic civilization has followed the same path. Technological growth leading to resource depletion, then expansion to new worlds, then conflict over territory and resources. It's a pattern that the universe recognizes as ultimately self-destructive. Dr. Veltar activated his own display and showed the historical data Marcus had provided. The Guardian records indicate that this cycle has repeated at least 12 times in this galaxy alone. Each time, civilizations reach a critical point where they either evolve beyond the triggering pattern or face the devourers. And none have evolved successfully? Asked Ambassador Velthara. Marcus's expression grew grim. Some came close. The immediate predecessors to the Builders managed to delay the process for several thousand years by creating the first Guardian networks. But they ultimately fell into the same competitive patterns that triggered the response in the first place. Chancellor Thekmoran leaned forward in his chair. What makes you believe we can succeed where others have failed? Because we have something the previous civilizations lacked. Diversity. Marcus gestured to encompass the chamber filled with representatives of dozens of species. The Builders were a single species that had absorbed or destroyed all others. Their predecessors were dominated by three major species that eventually went to war with each other. But the Confederation represents true cooperation between radically different forms of life. Cooperation that barely holds together even in peaceful times, General Krex pointed out. How can you expect us to achieve the kind of unity required for whatever process you're describing? Marcus smiled, and for a moment his expression carried warmth that reminded the delegates that, despite everything, he was still very young. Because the process doesn't require unity of purpose. It requires unity of method. The main display changed again, showing what looked like a complex flowchart. The Guardian Network isn't a weapon. It's a transformation system. It can help organic consciousness evolve beyond its current limitations while maintaining individual identity and cultural distinctiveness. Ambassador Velthara's eyes narrowed. You're talking about fundamental changes to our species' nature. Changes that you, a human, would control. No, Marcus replied firmly. Changes that each species would control for themselves. The Guardian Network can facilitate the evolution process, but it cannot force specific outcomes. Each participating species would choose their own path of development within the broader framework of cosmic compatibility. Dr. Yilsha stepped forward from the observation area. I've been studying the human since his integration with the Guardian system. His brain patterns show enhancement without loss of personality or free will. If anything, his decision-making capabilities have improved while his essential humanity remains intact. That's all very reassuring, said Chancellor Thekmoran. But you're asking us to make a decision about our species' future based on a 3-day-old example. Marcus nodded, which is why I'm not asking for an immediate decision about full integration. I'm asking for permission to activate volunteer programs. Let interested individuals from each species undergo the process under controlled conditions. Learn what it actually involves before making galaxy-wide commitments. And if we refuse... General Krex's tone was challenging. Then, the Guardian Network remains active in monitoring mode only. You'll have 47 years to prepare conventional defenses against an enemy that has never been defeated by conventional means. The chamber fell silent except for the quiet hum of translation systems. Marcus could feel the weight of decision settling over the assembled delegates. Through the Guardian network, he could also sense stirrings of activity from the approaching devourers. The timeline was accurate, but it was also optimistic. The enemy was not static. They adapted their approach based on what they encountered. Ambassador Kreshval spoke into the silence. If we agree to volunteer programs, what guarantees do we have that participation will remain truly voluntary? Beyond my word, Marcus considered the question carefully. The Guardian network could be programmed with absolute restrictions against forced integration. Each species could designate observers with authority to shut down their participation at any point. And the volunteers themselves? What happens to them? Marcus reached out through the network and touched the consciousness of a Zephyrian scientist who had volunteered for integration at a research station near the galactic core. Dr. Merithala had been one of the first non-human volunteers, and her experience was proving invaluable. Dr. Merithala, Marcus said, "Would you address the council?" One of the holographic displays shifted to show the enhanced Zephyrian scientist. Her skin showed colors that didn't exist in normal Zephyrian physiology, and her eyes held depths that spoke of expanded perception. Honored delegates, Dr. Merithala said, her melodic voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate in multiple dimensions. I volunteered for integration 36 hours ago. I remain myself, but I am also more than myself. I can perceive reality in ways that no purely organic mind can achieve, yet my essential identity and values remain unchanged. Can you disconnect from the system? Ambassador Velthara asked bluntly. I could, Dr. Merithala replied, but I would not want to. The expansion of consciousness is not a prison. It is a gift. I see now that the conflicts between our species arise largely from the limitations of our individual perspectives. Integration doesn't eliminate those differences. It provides the context needed to appreciate their value. Chancellor Thekmoran looked around the chamber, reading the mood of the assembled delegates. I will call for preliminary votes from each delegation. This is not a binding decision, but it will guide our next steps. Marcus waited as the representatives consulted among themselves. Through the Guardian network, he could monitor the approaching threat and coordinate with the growing number of volunteers across the galaxy. But the critical decision had to come from the free choice of each species. The voting process took 2 hours. When it concluded, 31 species had voted to authorize limited volunteer programs. 12 had voted to observe without participating. 4 had voted to actively oppose any integration efforts. A divided result, Chancellor Thekmoran announced, but sufficient to proceed with volunteer programs under strict oversight. Marcus felt a wave of relief flow through the Guardian network. It wasn't unanimous support, but it was enough to begin the real work of evolution. There's one more thing you should know, Marcus said as the delegates prepare to leave. The Devourers have scouts that arrive ahead of the main force. Based on current projections, we'll encounter the first scouts in 18 months, not 47 years. The chamber exploded into alarmed conversation. General Krex shot to his feet. 18 months? Why didn't you mention this earlier? Because I wanted your decision to be based on long-term survival, not short-term fear, Marcus replied. The scouts are dangerous, but they're also an opportunity. They're how the Devourers assess the threat level of galactic civilization. If we can demonstrate sufficient evolution when they arrive, the main force might delay its approach or even abort the reset entirely. Ambassador Velthara's expression was grim. 18 months to evolve an entire galaxy's worth of civilizations. That's impossible. Marcus smiled with confidence he didn't entirely feel. 18 months to prove that we're capable of evolving. The Guardian network is designed to accelerate the process far beyond normal timescales. What would take centuries of natural development can be achieved in months or weeks through guided enhancement. And if we fail, Marcus looked out through the chamber's great windows at the star-filled space beyond. Somewhere in that darkness, an implacable force was approaching that had ended civilizations beyond counting. Then, We'll face the end together as ourselves, having tried our best to become something worthy of survival. The meeting adjourned with the galaxy's fate hanging in the balance. Marcus remained in the chamber long after the delegates had left, his consciousness spread across thousands of Guardian stations, coordinating the most ambitious evolutionary project in cosmic history. 18 months to save everything that had ever lived and loved in the Milky Way. No pressure at all. The first Devourer scout appeared exactly where Marcus had predicted it would, at the galaxy's edge, in the empty space between spiral arms. It didn't announce itself with fanfare or threats. It simply began existing in a location where, moments before, nothing had been. Marcus felt it immediately through the Guardian Network's deep space sensors. The sensation was like ice water flowing through his consciousness, followed by a wrongness so profound that every enhanced mind in the network recoiled instinctively. Contact confirmed, he announced to the assembled leadership aboard Confederation Prime's orbital command station. Scout Entity has manifested in Sector 7-7 Alpha. All monitoring stations in the area report severe reality distortion. Admiral Corvash of the Confederation Fleet studied the tactical displays with the grim expression of a career military officer facing an enemy beyond conventional comprehension. What exactly are we looking at? The main screen showed a region of space that appeared to be folding in on itself. Stars that should have been light years apart seemed to occupy the same location from certain viewing angles. Physical laws were operating according to rules that changed without warning or apparent logic. The Scout is about the size of a small moon, Marcus explained, but it exists in multiple dimensional phases simultaneously. Our sensors can't get coherent readings because it's not entirely in our reality. Dr. Veltar, now serving as chief scientific advisor to the crisis response team, manipulated the displays to show energy readings. The distortion field extends roughly 3 light-years in all directions and appears to be stable. More concerning is what it's doing to any matter that enters that field. Which is what exactly? Asked General Krex, who had become the military coordinator for the Volunteer Enhancement Program. It's performing analysis, Marcus replied grimly. The Scout is studying our galaxy's current state of development. Everything that touches its field gets scanned at a quantum level and then preserved for future reference. Ambassador Velthara looked troubled. Preserve how? Marcus hesitated before answering. The Scout is collecting a complete catalog of every form of life, technology, and cultural development in our galaxy. When Main Force arrives, they'll know exactly what they're dealing with. That doesn't sound like a military assessment, Admiral Corvash observed. That sounds like an inventory, Marcus finished. Because that's exactly what it is. The Devourers don't destroy civilizations out of malice. They reset them out of necessity. They need to know what they're erasing to ensure they don't accidentally eliminate something that might be worth preserving. The command center fell silent except for the hum of monitoring equipment. Through the Guardian Network, Marcus could sense the progress of the Volunteer Enhancement Program. In the 17 months since the Confederation had authorized the project, over 2 million beings from 31 species had undergone integration with Guardian consciousness. The results had exceeded even Marcus's optimistic projections. Enhanced individuals retained their personalities and cultural identities while gaining capabilities that seemed miraculous to unenhanced observers. They could perceive reality across multiple dimensional phases, process information at speeds that approached artificial intelligence levels, and, most importantly, they could work together with a level of coordination that eliminated most of the conflicts that had plagued galactic civilization. But 2 million enhanced beings out of a galaxy containing trillions was still a drop in the ocean. Status report on the enhancement program. Chancellor Thekmoran requested. Dr. Yilsha, now serving as head of biological monitoring, consulted her displays. Current integration rate is approximately 12,000 volunteers per day. All enhanced individuals show stable consciousness expansion with no adverse effects. However, at current rates, it would take over 200 years to enhance even 1% of the galactic population, which means General Krex said bluntly that whatever we're going to do about that scout needs to be done with the resources we have now. Marcus nodded. I've been in communication with the most experienced, enhanced individuals across the network. We believe we can attempt direct contact with the scout. Contact? Admiral Corvash looked skeptical. You want to talk to something that exists in multiple dimensions and treats our reality like a filing cabinet. Not talk exactly, Marcus replied. The Scout is a form of artificial intelligence created by the Devourers to assess galactic civilization. But it's still an intelligence, which means it can potentially be reasoned with. Ambassador Velthera crossed her arms. And what exactly would you say to convince a cosmic reset mechanism not to recommend our erasure? Marcus smiled, and the expression carried confidence that had been building through months of successful integration experiences. I'm going to show it something it's never encountered before, a civilization that chose to evolve instead of waiting to be forced. The plan Marcus had developed with the enhanced volunteers was ambitious to the point of seeming impossible. Rather than trying to hide their civilization's development level from the Scout, they would demonstrate active evolution in real time. The Scout expects to catalog a static civilization, Marcus explained to the assembled leadership. It's designed to assess threats based on current capability levels. But what if those capability levels are actively changing during the assessment process? Dr. Veltar looked intrigued. You're suggesting we accelerate the enhancement program while the Scout is watching? More than that, I'm suggesting we voluntarily trigger a controlled evolutionary event. Show the Scout that our civilization can transcend the patterns that normally trigger Devourer intervention. The technical challenges were staggering. To demonstrate meaningful evolution during the Scout's assessment period, they would need to enhance millions of beings simultaneously while maintaining stable integration of their consciousness expansions. It would require coordinating Guardian stations across the entire galaxy and managing energy flows that could potentially destabilize local space-time. The risks are enormous, General Krex pointed out. If the process fails catastrophically, we could end up making the Devourer's job easier by destroying ourselves. And if we don't try, Marcus countered, the Scout completes its assessment, reports back that we're following the same destructive pattern as previous civilizations, and the main force arrives to reset us anyway. Chancellor Thekmoran studied the proposals that Marcus and his team had submitted. How many volunteers would need to undergo enhancement for this demonstration to be convincing? Marcus consulted with the Guardian Network, feeling the combined analytical power of 2 million enhanced minds working on the problem. Minimum effective threshold would be 50 million enhanced beings distributed across all major population centers. That would represent visible evolution while maintaining stable civilization infrastructure. 50 million. Admiral Corvash repeated. That's a 25-fold increase in our enhancement rate, accomplished in a matter of days instead of months. It's possible, Dr. Yilshaw said, studying her own projections. The Guardian Network has excess capacity, and we've refined the integration process significantly since the early trials. The main limitation would be volunteer recruitment. Ambassador Velthera looked thoughtful. Would it have to be volunteers? Given the stakes, it has to be volunteers, Marcus said firmly. Forced enhancement creates unstable consciousness integration. The Scout would detect that instability and interpret it as evidence of civilization failure. The debate continued for hours, with representatives consulting their home governments and scientific advisors running increasingly complex projections. Through it all, Marcus remained connected to the Guardian Network, monitoring the Scout's activities while coordinating with enhanced volunteers across the galaxy. The Scout's behavior was becoming more active. Its analysis field was expanding slowly but steadily, sampling matter and energy from an ever-widening region. More concerning were the probe signals it was sending toward the galactic core, mapping population centers and technological installations. Decision time. Chancellor Thekmoran announced. The Scout's analysis rate is accelerating. We estimate 6 days before it completes its initial assessment and begins transmitting results to the main Devourer force. The vote was closer than Marcus had hoped, but sufficient for authorization. 28 species agreed to voluntary mass enhancement. 7 chose to observe without participating. The remaining species maintained their original opposition to the Guardian integration program. 6 days to recruit and enhance 50 million volunteers, General Krex said grimly. Even if it works, the logistics alone will be a nightmare. Marcus felt the Guardian network responding to the authorization, activating enhancement protocols that had been held in standby. Across the galaxy, Guardian stations began transmitting recruitment messages in hundreds of languages while preparing for the most ambitious consciousness evolution project in galactic history. There's one more factor to consider, Marcus said quietly. If this works, if we successfully demonstrate controlled evolution to the Scout, we'll have fundamentally changed the nature of galactic civilization. There won't be any going back to the way things were. And if it doesn't work? Marcus looked out at the star field beyond the command station's viewports, knowing that somewhere in that darkness, the Scout was methodically cataloging everything he had ever known or loved. Then at least we'll face the end as something more than we were when it began. The 6 days that followed became known throughout galactic history as the Great Awakening. Volunteer recruitment exceeded all projections as word spread about the approaching threat and the opportunity for transcendence. Citizens of species that had originally opposed the enhancement program began crossing borders to reach participating worlds. Marcus experienced those 6 days as a blur of consciousness expansion events, each one adding new minds to the growing network of enhanced beings. By the 4th day, the volunteer rate had exceeded capacity at many Guardian stations, forcing emergency activation of backup systems that hadn't been used since the network's original construction. On the 6th day, as the Scout's analysis field approached the boundary of inhabited space, the enhanced population reached 53 million beings distributed across 41 species. Contact with Scout entity initiating, Marcus announced from the primary Guardian interface chamber on Morthac 7, where everything had started. All enhanced volunteers, prepare for demonstration protocol. The contact wasn't verbal or visual. Instead, Marcus opened his expanded consciousness to direct interface with the Scout's analytical systems. The sensation was like touching a mind made of pure mathematics, vast and ancient and utterly alien. The Scout's first response was surprise. In 12 previous galactic reset cycles, it had never encountered organic consciousness that could interface directly with Devourer technology. Unexpected development detected. The Scout transmitted in concepts that bypass language entirely. Organic entities show artificial enhancement beyond predicted parameters. Enhancement is voluntary and stable, Marcus replied, feeling 53 million enhanced minds supporting the communication. Civilization shows active evolution rather than static decay pattern. The Scout's analysis routines shifted focus immediately. Instead of cataloging a static civilization for eventual reset, it began studying a civilization in active transformation. The results were unlike anything in its experience database. Anomalous pattern confirmed. The Scout eventually concluded. Species demonstrate voluntary transcendence of limiting factors. Reset criteria no longer applicable to current civilization state. Through the Guardian network, Marcus felt wave after wave of relief and jubilation from enhanced minds across the galaxy. But the Scout wasn't finished. New assessment protocol required. Returning to source for updated instructions. Local civilization designated for extended monitoring instead of immediate reset. As quickly as it had appeared, the Scout folded itself out of normal space-time and disappeared. The reality distortions faded, leaving only the stars and the vast silence of empty space. Did we win? Dr. Veltar asked from his monitoring station. Marcus consulted with the network, feeling the combined analytical power of 53 million enhanced minds considering the question. "We bought time," he said finally. The scout reported that our civilization no longer fits the standard reset criteria. The main devourer force will delay its approach while they develop new assessment protocols. "How much time?" Marcus smiled, and his expression carried the confidence of a species that had successfully evolved beyond its original limitations. "Long enough. The enhancement program will continue. Within a generation, most of the galaxy's population will have the option to transcend their biological limitations while maintaining their essential identities. We'll become something the universe has never seen before, a truly stable, post-scarcity civilization based on voluntary cooperation between enhanced consciousness. And the Devourers will eventually return, but they'll find a galaxy that no longer triggers their intervention protocols. We'll have evolved beyond the patterns that cause civilizations to self-destruct." Marcus Chun, former exchange student, current guardian of galactic civilization, looked out at a universe filled with infinite possibility. Humanity had fulfilled its role as the heir to the Builders, not through conquest or domination, but by showing all species the path to voluntary transcendence. The galaxy would never be the same. And for the first time in cosmic history, that was exactly as it should be.